Welcome to Speaking from Experience, a District 123 podcast hosted by Aisha Hussein. With Toastmasters International spanning over 148 countries, with more than 270,000 members, the annual quest for excellence unfolds as more than 30,000 members compete for the top spot at the World Championship of Public Speaking. District 123 has been a launching pad for many of these Toastmasters determined to compete at the world stage. In this podcast, you'll have the pleasure of hearing from some of those accomplished speakers as they share their experiences and reveal what it took to achieve excellence in the world of public speaking. Get ready for insightful conversations with members from District 123 as they share with you their journey to greatness.
Hello, and welcome to Speaking from Experience with your host Aisha Hussein with District 123. Our guest today is someone whose leadership and communication coach has delivered speeches, over 5,000 speeches in over 80 countries, had appeared in over 300 television and radio shows. But that's not all. He's an avid traveler, his experience with sailing, river rafting, and you bet, cycling. Yes, you name it, and he's done it all. He is none other than World Champion of Public Speaking 2005, Lance Miller. Welcome to the show, Lance.
Thanks, Aisha.
Appreciate your time.
Oh, it's great to be here.
As I was introducing you, I have to ask you this. Sailing, why?
Well, it's interesting. My family had a summer home on a lake in Michigan. So we had a little sunfish sailboat. And my dad liked to sail. And I was really little. I didn't like to sail. But I got out as a kid and started sailing in the sunfish. And I just fell in love with capturing the wind and controlling it and the boat. And then I had buddies that had their sailboats. So we were all out. And then the family would have a little bigger boat and we'd go out in it. And there's just a magical feeling to me about harnessing nature. Not having a motor that you're just gearing down with gasoline and running, but harnessing nature and learning to use the forces to go where you want. And to me, it's almost an analogy for life because there's forces and ebbs and flows in life, and you have to figure out how to use those to get where you want. And you can't sail directly into the wind. You have to tack back and forth. And there was just so many incredible times I had in confidence building in like stormy, windy weather. There were a lot of times that my buddies and I were the only boat on the lake. And we were out there and nobody else would go out, and you're having to keep the thing from flipping over. And even if you flipped over, you had to get it back up. But the confidence you had in being able to handle those forces just gave me confidence in other areas of life as well. But I wanted to learn to sail bigger boats, and I was fortunate to be able to get on an 84-foot, which is about 20-meter boat and 30-meter boat, and sail across the North Atlantic to Norway one summer. So I did celestial navigation, and that was real sailing.
That also resonates a little bit with how contests run. You are a world champion of public speaking, heavy title. I'm sure it didn't happen over a day. It must have been a lot of boats rocking and back and forth.
Yeah, it was 13 years of basically getting tossed in the drink,
So I would really love our audience to hear the speech that got you to the title.
Okay.
The ultimate question, that question that has plagued man since the dawn of time, and that question that each and every one of us must ask at some point in our life. Do you validate? Mr. Chairman, fellow Toastmasters and friends, I was 26 years old. I was living in a small town in Indiana. I had a job I didn't like. I hadn't had a date in 3 years. And I had a couple of roommates named Mom and Dad. I felt like my life was going nowhere. So I took control. I left my home and my family, and I headed to Los Angeles to start over. 6 months later, I had a job I didn't like. I was dating a girl who was trying to make me better by pointing out all of my faults. And I had a couple of roommates that made Dumb and Dumber look like Einstein and Oppenheimer. I had changed everything in my life, but nothing had changed. I still felt like I was going nowhere. And then one day after a business meeting, all I wanted to do was get my parking validated. And I walked over to the receptionist and said, "Excuse me, do you validate?" And she looked up and said, "Well, yes, I do. You have a lovely smile." Showing her the ticket, I said, "No, I was just in a meeting with your boss. Do you validate?" And she said, "Well, let me compliment you on what a fine choice of business associates you have." Catching on, I said, "You have such a keen sense of humor. I'm going to go tell your boss how lucky he is to have you out here." And she goes, "Give me that ticket." She took her little machine and she went, cha-chink. And then as she handed it back, she looked at me and she said, "There's something special about you." I took the ticket and headed for the elevator. But I stopped. I turned around and just said, "Thank you." I don't know how long it had been since I'd felt validated. Her words stayed with me all the way home. And as I was looking at my life, I started to wonder how long it had been since I'd validated somebody else. I wanted to do that. I wanted to make people feel good. But I felt that I needed to be important. I needed to be successful, so that when I said something to somebody, it meant something to them. But that receptionist had just made my day. Heck, she made my month. With one little cha-chink, she stamped my ticket. And I thought, I can do that. So I went home to see Dumb and Dumber. These guys were constantly bringing people back to the apartment. It was driving me nuts. But I went in and I said, "You make friends faster than anybody I've ever seen. And that is a gift." To see their faces, I swear they got smarter right before my eyes. Cha-chink. I went to see my girlfriend, and I thanked her for caring enough about me that she wanted to see me be as good as I could be. You know what? She got nicer. Cha-chink. I went to work, and I thanked my boss for hiring me. He'd done me a favor, and I started to enjoy my work a lot more. Cha-chink. I used to think I had to be important before I could validate other people. I used to look at people as obstacles to my success. But what I discovered was I became important when I validated other people. I became important to that person and that person. People were the pathway to my success. I started trying to find something I could stamp on everybody I met. That little piece of goodness, that little piece of rightness, just a little cha-chink. I started to feel like a superhero. Underneath this mild-mannered exterior was a blue and red spandex suit with a giant V on the chest. Yes, I was the validator. When things would get tense, they'd tighten up, I'd come in and cha-chink, cha-chink, cha-chink. I had plenty of ink. I'd hear people say, "Who was that man?" "I don't know, but I heard this cha-chink, and suddenly I feel so much better now." And then I figured it out. You know what's wrong with the world? You know what's wrong with me? Do you know what's wrong with you? Who cares? The question is, what is right with the world? What is right with me? What is right with you? The common denominator of all humanity is the fact that we are human. We are by nature imperfect. It takes no special talent to find an imperfection in another person. But every person goes through life wanting to be right, wanting to be valuable. Find that. Bring it out in them. I started to discover in my life that I got what I validated. I found out that I brought out the goodness, the value in others by validating that. We have a lot of problems in this world, but I've learned that there is not a problem that exists between a parent and a child, between a husband and a wife, between a worker and his employer, or between races, cultures, or nations that does not stem directly from an inability or an unwillingness to validate the rightness, the value, and the goodness in another. This is the ultimate question. Do you validate? But this is not what's important. What's important is, can you cha? Can you cha? Can you cha? You've been a great audience.
Wow. That was an awesome speech.
Thank you.
And you talk about validation, how in day-to-day life we struggle with just a pat on the back. And you also shared, I had the pleasure to listening to you earlier, where you shared your story of how you were looking for a pat on your back from your father. A lot of people go around not getting that validation. Any advice how to deal with that?
Well, it's interesting because I think, first of all, a lot of people think they're smart if they can figure out what your problem is and why you're, they think that gives them a hand up. And as I said in that speech, it takes no special skill or talent to find something wrong with someone. We're all human, we're all highly imperfect. That doesn't take any skill, but can you figure out what's right? And what really flipped things around for me was when we were building my Toastmasters club, which we built to the number 4 club in the world with 95 members. And the way we built it was by really working with what was right with people. And so people came to the club, they always felt recognized and validated. And there were people that had all sorts of issues and problems and petty foibles that would drive you nuts, but we just focused on the rightness. And what we discovered, what I saw happen with my eyes, is I saw the things they did that were irritating others, and we'll say the non-optimum activities that they had started to diminish as we strengthened the good ones. They stopped doing the things, even though we never talked to them about it. They stopped doing them, they started focusing on the good things. And this whole idea of just, really uplifting people on how right they are, because one of the mechanisms I think that we struggle with as human beings is we as individuals want to be right. And the way we make sure we're right is by telling you that you're wrong, and that makes us right. And we push people down in the process of that. And the people that made the biggest impact in my life were people that helped lift me up and let me know I was able and capable. And I was always a very able and capable person, but as I said, I did have, came out of a family, I came out of a wonderful family environment with this little, dark lining on it that you just couldn't ever, it was sort of like, you just couldn't get this, you're doing great. That it was like you're never really where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be doing better than you are. And so no matter what I was doing, I always felt like I wasn't quite there. I just was not winning yet. And as much as I was winning in life and as many things as I was doing, that was always riding in the back of my mind. And I sort of handled that with my Toastmasters club building experience and realized that I could uplift other people. And I realized what had happened in my own life. And people have horrible experiences in life where they're physically abused or sexually abused or live in abject poverty and have been, shot and dismembered. And all. That's none of that. But I think we all carry with us a little baggage that was imprinted on us with the aberrations of those who were bigger and older. And to the degree that we can overcome those and become ourselves, I think that's a path that everybody wants to walk.
Wow, that you said a lot of things that resonated with me. And one thing that I want to focus on is how you said you took a club that was failing to number 4. I want to understand, because that's not just limited to Toastmasters Club. That applies at workplace, building team, that applies with relationships. And you said to focus on the strength, not to, hey, I'm right because you're wrong. I'm right because I'm right. And focusing on the strength. So that really, really resonates with me. And I hope our audience can pick that you can be right without proving somebody else wrong. I also realized about your journey that you were mentioning, how you were doing all the things that's expected of you, and still you felt not successful.
Right.
What's success to you?
I think for me, success is achieving your own goals and purposes, hitting your own targets in life. It's not necessarily being more successful than somebody else. For me, it's, do I feel that I'm operating at the level of competency and influence, that I should be operating at? And, or am I efficiently living my life to achieve goals and targets on an ongoing basis? And it's really important, if you achieve a goal, to put another one out there. And you see people all the time that they achieve a goal and they sort of ride on that goal. And I think there's people that look at the World Championship of Public Speaking as, oh, I achieved the goal, now I'm a world champion, and you're going to sit there. Well, you're just going to watch the world pass you by if you try to sit on that title. Another thing that happens, as an example, you start to get invited out to districts to not give 5 to 7 minute speeches, to give 1 hour talks, and to give 45-minute workshops, and to help people. And you got to shift gears from doing a 5 to 7 minute competition speech to now giving an hour keynote that holds that audience and resonates with them as much as that 5 to 7 minute speech did. So it's a huge jump in capacity. To the degree that I could accomplish that, I felt like I was successful. To the degree that I wasn't meeting the challenges that life was giving me, I wasn't successful.
So if I'm understanding correct, are you telling our audience, don't do what's expected, be creative, break the ceiling?
Well, we're here at the District 123 conference, and my keynote was all about, I was doing what I was supposed to do. And there's a lot of people in Toastmasters that run their clubs based on what they're supposed to do, and the clubs fail. And the whole secret that I discovered was, you've got to figure it out for yourself. You got to figure out what works. And it's not what you're supposed to do is what somebody else is telling you to do. You're not owning your actions. You're doing what somebody else is telling you. And so to that degree, you're a puppet.
Okay.
If you're going to own your life, you have to create your life on a moment by moment basis. And that's, you're looking at stuff and figuring out what you should do. And that can come from driving down a crowded street and decide, I'm going to get on a different street that's not crowded. It can be being in a bad job, I'm going to figure out a better job to get into. It can be in a bad job that's actually good people, and you're going to figure out how to make it a good job. It doesn't mean you have to leave, but it means you got to figure it out. And so the whole thing is get our creativity up and start figuring out and thinking and for ourselves, and not just taking what life gives us, but take what life gives us and overcome it.
But that applies not just to Toastmasters.
No, it applies, well, to me,
relationship everywhere.
Toastmasters is a little microcosm of life.
Yes.
So what I struggled with in Toastmasters, I was struggling with in life. And what I was struggling with in life, I was struggling with in Toastmasters. And Toastmasters gave me a warm, gentle, loving environment to work it out. So life wasn't that nice, but in Toastmasters, it was nice.
So would it be okay to say that Toastmasters was your training ground, which you took it and then you applied it in the real life?
Yeah, it's like you want to be a great athlete, or you want to be strong and do stuff, and you go to the gym. It's not that you're the best person in the gym. It's that you're working out so you can go out in life and be good. And that's what was my approach with Toastmasters all along. I mean, I liked having fun in the meetings and stuff, but I was trying to develop my skills so I could be better at living outside the club.
Wow. Yes. You stumped me for a second here. But you're also a communication leader.
Yeah.
And many times, a lot of us face friction when communicating. Can you tell us about an incident where you faced with somebody who absolutely refused to take any advice on communication, and how you got through them?
Oh, there's probably been, first of all, there's a ton that have refused to take any advice in communication, and they refused to take any advice in communication. I was never able to get through to them. And things that come to mind up front were sometimes the people closest to us are the most difficult to work with. Family members, close friends, that were, because there's so much history there and they don't always see us for who we are.
Matters of the heart?
Yeah, they see us for who we are in the family, and they see us like as a brother or a sister, or as a son or an uncle or something like that. They don't see us as this individual with possibly good viewpoints, from that standpoint. And to be honest, I wish I could go, oh, here's a great example. I don't have one right off the top of my head. There's personal things I don't want to discuss on the podcast and go, oh, well, and then people look at it, or that person hears it and they go, I can't believe you talked about that on the podcast. But the whole point is really getting over that component we were talking about, that incessant drive to be right versus really working to figure out how to make the other person right. And the other thing is, do we have some goal or some action that we can agree on we want to move toward, versus instead of doing this, we're trying to move towards something. And if we can agree, well, let's move toward this, and we get agreement to move that. And one of the things I talk a lot about team building and leadership and management, and I said, really, as a leader, you have two tools. You have communication and agreement.
Okay.
That's all. You look at an organization is putting agreement into a group so everybody knows what they're doing. They agree on what they're doing.
Yep.
And you do that with communication. And so what I look for is, if I have disagreement, I don't have agreement.
Uh-huh.
So if I'm having disagreements, I've got to figure out how to take that disagreement and create agreement on it. And I do that with communication. And sometimes it's listening, it's really understanding, but it's getting that, do we agree on where we're going? Just as an example, we're in Toronto here, and if we get in the car and somebody goes, let's go, and someone wants to go to Ottawa and somebody else wants to go to Montreal, you have disagreement. You're going in two different directions. Yep. You're not going to agree until you both agree on where you're going. Yep. So maybe you go, heck, we're going in two different directions here. We don't have agreement, and if you say, okay, what we'll do, let's go to Ottawa and then we'll go to Montreal. Okay, now we're going to go both places. This is how we're going to do it. But you do that with communication. So the whole point is taking disagreement and turning into agreement and figuring out what you can do with that.
So kind of win-win situation.
Well, it's win-win, but it's also the simplicity of agreement is, I'll give my definition is cooperation without conflict.
Oh,
so if you have conflict, you don't have agreement.
Cooperation without conflict.
So what do? You look for where you have conflict. And where I have conflict, I don't have agreement. And so I find the conflict and I go, okay, I have to put agreement there. So it's a simple little, okay, but you're dealing with human beings who are highly emotional and want to be right, and sometimes extremely illogical. So there's all these things you have to deal with. And they have, very fixed viewpoints on things, and they have insecurities that they don't want you to touch or find out that they have. And so we're dealing with this sort of neutron bomb of a person that also has tremendous goodness inside them, and caring and love and compassion, and this crazy combination of things you have to try to connect into and tap into that goodness and have them let go of, because the badness is never the person.
Yes.
The person's good. The badness is never the person. And so you let them let go of that. And people have had bad experiences, and they have defensive mechanisms that they put in place that they're not going to allow, and they're not going to experience that again. And as soon as you remind them of somebody that did that, they turn into a raging fang-toothed tiger that's going to scrape your eyes out, and stuff. And so you have to know how to tiptoe around those and really watch the person. We were talking about this earlier, is that everything communicates.
Yes.
And so it's not just your words. When you're working with someone, are you watching their facial expressions? You're watching their eyes. You're watching their skin tone. You'll watch people. I'll actually see their energy tighten up around them. You can see that where people all of a sudden get tense. It's not like they wrinkled. You just see them get tense. Right. And you go, oh, this isn't good. I don't want them to be tense. And so we talked. Was there something, what happened? And there's people you can go direct with it on. There's other people you have to sort of dance around, and you go, oh, it's going better. I'm going to talk about this because it's going better. Don't talk about that.
So if I'm understanding correctly, communication is not what just you hear, but their facial expression, their body language, and you have to work around it.
Yeah, well, that's you're observing. The whole idea of communication comes from the word common.
Yes.
Okay, so when we have communication, it's what's duplicated. And if you communicated 50 words and they get duplicated 2, you had communication on 2. That's all. The rest of it just hit the wall, okay? But it's what was in common. It's what got understood. So when you're watching that, you have to look at people and look at audiences when you're a speaker. And do you feel like people are receiving your message okay? Or is everybody, flipping through their cell phone or going to sleep and snoring? It's like, what's happening? Or are they sitting there and just, like dead on a thing? So being a good speaker, you have to watch, where's the duplication happening with the audience? Where's the interaction with the audience? Speaking one-on-one, you have to watch the person and sort of see where they are. And that whole, come back, that whole thing about validation is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful tool to start off with, talking about how wonderful somebody is, or I so appreciate that. Sometimes I'll just say, you have a lovely smile. It's just like, wow, thank you for coming. I just want to let you know, does anybody ever tell you have a lovely smile? And they go, oh no, all of a sudden they feel better, right? And it's like, no, so what is it you want to talk about? Well, if they're going to come, yell at you, you just soften that because they don't want to yell at you but what it does, it puts some positive energy, positive reinforcement behind the communication, and it puts more agreement there. The person feels better, and so there's a lot. I've been very active in Toastmasters, but I've also been very active in doing very deep dives on communication, emotional intelligence, and all these things on really very practical applications of it. So it's not just my Toastmasters experience, but I bring it to Toastmasters and practice it.
Right. So from everything that you talked about, bring the positivity in, and you also are a leadership coach. And I see that, like, if you go back 20 years, the leader's definition was different: strong, resilient. And now that emotional intelligence piece is being added and leading with empathy is being added, which I've seen in recent years coming up. How important is leading with empathy?
Well, here's what happens. Leading is really simple. But the fact is that most people don't understand it, so they come up with a bunch of complication on it. And the whole concept of a servant leader, we hear this? There is no other type of leadership than servant leadership. But the reason we call that is that people are horrible leaders, and they try to lead through authority and domination and nullification and force. And that's actually not leadership. That actually creates revolts, because people don't like to be dominated and nullified and be treated with a force. They don't like bayonets stuck in their back. They'll fight back if that happens. So yeah, as a leader, you serve the people that you're leading, but the whole I read a great book on leadership, and I recommend you read it if you haven't. It's called The Dictionary. And if you look up the word lead, it goes down to a Latin word that means to go.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, and actually, so the whole idea of leadership is you're going somewhere. And you have to know where you're going. And what happens with leaders is this happened in the corporate world with me. We didn't know where we were going, but you were supposed to come to work and get on the treadmill and run harder and work harder and not get paid more, but we weren't going anywhere. And what happened to my Toastmasters club, we were going somewhere. Toastmasters back in the 90s ranked all the clubs in the world, and we wanted to be a top 10 club. So we were going someplace. We were going to be a top 10 club. So everybody in the club was working to accomplish that. And I have a program called Leadership is Everybody's Business. It's not about I'm the leader and you're not. It's like, as a leader, it's my responsibility to get the agreement on where we're going.
Yes.
And if everybody agrees where we're going and now we're pushing in the same direction, which comes up with another definition I use, which is the definition of a team. And this came up when I was a kid. We raised horses, and we had two ponies, and we could put them in a pony cart by themselves. We tried to put them as a team, and they kept trying to go their own way. So a team is a group of, I don't care if it's horses or hamsters or human beings, it's a team pulling in the same direction. And what happens in, again, corporate organizations is you get one division working against another division internally, and they're fighting each other, and everybody's not going in the same direction. So the whole idea of building a team is getting everybody going towards the known goal we're trying to hit. Where are we going? And we know where we're going, and then the second component of leadership is arriving at that destination. So if you know where you're going and you arrive there, you're a leader. It's pretty simple in my book.
Oh, that is a unique definition I've heard. And yes, we should all go check out the meaning, what leadership means, before we try to lead.
And just one of the points, I use the dictionary. I said, the dictionary has the definitions of these concepts. And they always hear this story, or this question, if you were going to be stuck on a desert island and you could take one book, what would it be? I go, I take the dictionary because you go down to the derivations and the histories of the word. You can sit there. I can read the dictionary for years and just get more and more intelligent. Whereas if I had, Swiss Family Robinson or War and Peace, I'd read it once, maybe throw it twice. It's like, learn the definition of each one of those words, and it just gives crazy insight into the world.
That is beautiful, and also it makes you a better speaker because now you know more words.
Well, true, and there's a whole correlation between executive success and the vocabulary that people have. People with larger vocabularies are more successful in business, and there's been a whole study done on that. And I can't remember where it was, but it was fascinating. Understanding the meaning of words gives you the understanding of the concepts you need to deal with. And it actually makes sense. You're more intelligent if you truly understand the definitions of more words.
So I'm going to announce that on camera today, that Lance has inspired me to learn one new word every day, challenging my audience to say, if you can keep up.
There you go.
And on that note, I would like to bring our last guest, our last year's district champion, Mary Pomeroy. She left a question for you.
Okay.
Leave a question for my next guest. My question would be, what are 3 things that you can do to connect to your audience, to make your speech impactful and be heard and be repeated? What can you do to instill that in your audience, to engage your audience?
That was a good question. What 3 things can you do to connect with your audience? The first one you may not even realize, but the first one's to smile. And I used to walk on stage like a lot of people, and I was like, then I would get out there and I'd start my speech and I'd smile, and I'd watch videos of me walking on stage and I would sort of like look like I was grumpy. And the whole idea of just smiling to your audience warms them up tremendously. The other thing is never talk down to your audience. And I will guarantee you that in any audience you ever speak to, there are people that are smarter than you. Well, I'll say this, there's people that are smarter than me. They're more experienced than I am. And they've gone through tougher situations than I have. No matter what I've been through, there are people in the audience that have endured more than I have. And for me to stand on that stage and look at them and say, how many things are in your life you're not going to know? How many fears, are you not going to confront? Like, I'm the smartest person in the room and you're the stupidest, and I need to tell you that. No, so I said, use yourself as sort of self-deprecating humor. Use yourself. People relate more to failure than they do success. Share your failures with the audience. They're going to relate to you with your failures than successful. And there's this whole imposter syndrome where people try to stand up and be more successful than they are, and they turn into a completely different person when they get on stage. The last thing I would say to connect with your audience is the way you get someone to understand the point of your speech is not by looking at them and saying, maybe it's that book you haven't written or that trip you want to take. Don't try to tell the audience what's going on in their mind. The best way to get them to understand the point you made in your speech is share how you applied that point in your life. So there was this book I'd wanted to write, and I never had, and I took this point and I was able to write that book. And I'd always wanted to go to Italy, and I did this, and I was able to get to Italy, and I had this friend of mine, and I used this, and I was share how you did it, and they'll sit there and go, oh my gosh, I can do that, because they see it worked for you. And the best messages are not messages that we force on the audience. The best messages are the ones that the audience take of their own free will and go, oh, I want to use that, because if they take it of their own free will, they're going to own it. So the whole idea, and this goes back to this whole thing about being right. So many people want to tell the audience what they need to do because they think they're going to be the boss. They're going to be a more powerful speaker if they tell the audience what their problem is, they tell the audience what their solution is. And quite honestly, that's the problem we have as human beings, is we're all walking around telling each other what the problem is, okay? What you do is you share with the audience what worked for you and go, I don't know, maybe that would work for you. And the person goes, I'm going to try that. And then they'll take it of their own free will. So those are the 3 things. Smile, use yourself in self-deprecating humor from that standpoint, and don't talk down to your audience or act like you're better than them, and share how you applied the point in your life to get them to accept it.
Wow. I'm sure our audience can learn that. New aspiring speakers, contestants, or just in general communication. Don't tell them what to do. Show them and let them choose it.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Lance, for such an variety and the way audience can simplify all their answers. And now if you could please leave a question for our next guest.
The next guest, I'm going to ask you this question. What little thing in your life that you discovered or you developed made a big difference in your life? So what little thing in your life made a big difference in your life?
Thank you. I'm sure our audience would be in a treat when our next guest answers. But in the same time, I will ask our audience, think on that question, ponder on it. What have you done to make a difference? Signing off, Aisha Hussain and Lance, once again, thank you very much for gracing our stage.
My pleasure.
When I was a young child, my mama told me, son, don't ever let them make you afraid and never let them see you run. So no matter how they beat me down with their fists or their words, well, I get back